Hello, Imperfect Leaders. It's summer! And for leaders, that means reflection. And it means planning for the coming year. It is for that reason that this week's episode is an encore episode specifically picked with your upcoming year in mind. And then as Labor Day approaches, Season 3 will kick off. And I'm so excited about that because Jamie Almanzán from the Equity Collaborative is going to be joining me as a co-host and commentator. It is going to be great. So sit back and enjoy this encore presentation of An Imperfect Leader, the Superintendents and Leadership Podcast. At the end of every interview that we have for teacher candidates, we will say, "What questions do you have for us?" And they will always ask, "Well, what kind of support can I expect?" And we will always say, "Well, don't worry, we'll give you a mentor." But it's not real mentorship. I mean, it's support with the difficult kid or the field trip form or the grade card, but it isn't coaching. That's where partners like EdConnective step in. They provide observation and feedback with practice. That's real coaching. Their mission is to ensure that every student thrives by facilitating exceptional educator growth. So whether it's science of reading, whether it's leadership development, whether you're trying to build the best recruitment and retention efforts, check out edconnective.com. Hello, Imperfect Leaders. You know, hope is a pretty powerful theme. And it's the theme for today's conversation. My guest today starts with a quote from poet, activist, and National Youth Poet Laureate Amanda Gorman. I found it to be such a perfect way to start our conversation because my guest, Hattie Tate, she speaks to hope. She speaks to how important it is to maintain hope. In fact, she reflects on the words of Amanda Gorman and reminds listeners how every day we have not lost hope. And the key to maintaining this hope is a pretty simple one to say out loud, and sometimes really hard to achieve. It's relationships. She's so right. The influence and impact that comes from a deep and genuine relationship. So to kick off this really inspiring conversation with Hattie Tate, a district leader in Oakland, California, I give you 4 more stanzas from an Amanda Gorman poem, New Days Lyric, written and performed as the pandemic began to experience a bit of a waning. I mean, vaccines were on the horizon, brighter days appeared to be imminent. And so she wrote, "And now these moments we make, the moments we meet, and our hearts, once altogether beaten, now altogether beat. Never is that more important than those working with our children struggling to achieve their promise, often labeled as at risk." She discusses this with honesty and optimism. And in her after-action review, she reflects on her own career choices, a really deeply personal conversation. Thanks for tuning in. Today on An Imperfect Leader, Ms. Hattie Tate is my guest. Ms. Tate has many titles. A few include educator, principal, and administrator, all in the Oakland Unified School District in Oakland, California. And she's been the principal of an alternative school, has worked with the Department of Violence Prevention. She has served as an administrator and coordinator for the Juvenile Justice Center. She's been a leader with the Youth Diversion and Reentry Strategy Program and has been an important piece to Stanford University's Impact Labs as a researcher. Ms. Hattie Tate, welcome to An Imperfect Leader.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me, Peter.
It's funny because you and I were talking beforehand. You and I have known each other for a long time. So when you just said that so formally, I thought, oh gosh, come on, Hattie, loosen up. Here we go. So Hattie, it is so incredible to be connected to you after all these years. And I mean it. I think it's been like 20 years. And I remember meeting you in our doctoral program and being so incredibly moved by your passion for guiding Oakland's youth who may have been unsuccessful to become successful. And you know, lots of people have quotes at the end of their emails, and in our correspondence, I kept seeing yours. Yours is so deeply personal to the job you have. I wonder, would you read it? And then would you tell us why it's so meaningful to you?
Yes, definitely. So this quote comes from the youth poet, Amanda Gorman, and it goes like this. "We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover. And every known nook of our nation and every corner called our country. Our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge, battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it, for there is always light. If only we're brave enough to see it. If only we're brave enough to be it.
Ooh. What is that quote saying to you?
So that quote is so powerful to me, especially in the work that I've done. And it is good to be here with you. My feelings keep moving from feeling like I'm back in the Mills classrooms where we got to laugh, grow, play, and really develop strategies to do this work. And that quote resonates with me because it gives hope where there's no hope. It leads others to a light when there's darkness. It really talks about a future that we don't see today. We haven't seen that for a while. And in the time that this poet has become famous, from the poet herself, I've just found it resonates with me every day, that every day, irregardless to being battered, irregardless to battles lost, we have not lost the war. And the victories of helping young people build success is so huge. Even if I think about us and who we were when we started the program and how a power bigger than us have brought us to such high heights, and still we've kept that inner child in us alive. Well, we still enjoy life. We still have a real appreciation for self-nurturing. I can just tell by your confidence level with this podcast that you do. I enjoy seeing you at work, and I still enjoy my work. So that quote really moves me. It sustains me. It encourages me, and it motivates me to keep doing the work that I do to help other young people find motivation.
What inspires me as I hear you say that is this level of optimism. In the quote by Amanda Gorman, she says, "Our people diverse and beautiful will emerge battered and beautiful." That's sort of, these two very opposite, you would never consider them to be conjoined in any way. And it speaks to me, particularly in the work that you have done, about wanting to agitate for change within a system. Because systems, they will work aggressively to get back to status quo, right? Those who have benefited from the system really enjoy status quo, and they will work aggressively to get us back there, no matter what you do to try to agitate for change. And when I read this, it's we will emerge battered and beautiful in the sense that we will overcome this sense that we can't accomplish what it is we were set out to do. And so to me, it just was so beautiful. And to hear you read it, even more emotional. In preparing for our conversation today, I saw that in 2005, you were the first certified administrator for and slash restorative justice facilitator in Oakland. And you implemented school-wide student and staff restorative justice as a project in your building. And I also watched a program where you and a team of researchers from Stanford University spoke of the power of relationships as a foundation, particularly for young adults returning to their schools after having attended an alternative program outside of their home school. So I see this quote, I hear you reading it, I watch the Stanford piece, and it says to me that you really believe in restorative justice, in restorative practices. In an earlier episode of the podcast, a leader in Baltimore City spoke to how it transformed his school community. And I wonder, how have you seen restorative practices work in your school and in your practices?
Restorative justice really is a key to life when you think about the fact that every day we get up to do something and be successful. Even in regards to what stage of life, if you're learning, if you haven't launched a career, every day, humanity, society as a whole, we get up to do something to be successful. I like to think about it in terms of socio-emotional wellness and the competencies in that: self-awareness, social awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, and relationship building. Well, in the practice of the work that I've done in the years that we've been separated, I found that relationships are key to everything that I do, every day, all day. Whether it's a relationship within my family, it's the relationships that I'm encountering on the way to work in the car, as people cut me off or whatever. It's the relationships that I have to manage and build in order to create success as a team, because it's not just me being successful. If my team fails, then that's my failure as well. And so the whole idea around restorative justice is for us to bring our best self to work and restore harmony every single time it's broken. It's a hard job and it does seem impossible. And I think Amanda in her poetry points that out, that it can feel hopeless, but it's not. Because at any moment at the same time, we have to deal with, this could be my last moment with you. My relationship with you is important enough that I want my last moment with you to be an eternal positive reflection. And so I really work in a way that I'd like to restore and resolve all conflict, to be at peace every day with everybody, or at least take time to self-reflect and see what is it I could have done differently. What harm is left that's going to create a barrier to success tomorrow.
I imagine that in your work at Dewey, which alternative high school, that restorative justice, as I understand it, because we also, when I was a superintendent, deeply invested in restorative justice, restorative practices. We sent teams to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. We came back. We trained our leaders and our teachers and worked really hard to try to help adults build meaningful relationships with children on a daily basis, which is sort of the first part of restorative practices in terms of, you're circling up and your daily get to know kids, so that when something dramatic happens, you can draw on that deep relationship of trust, so that you can do this work together. It isn't about that there are no consequences for behavior, which sometimes critics will allege, oh, you're just letting kids get away with anything. It is about building meaningful relationships so that when the time comes that consequences are necessary, that they are just, appropriate, and thoughtful about the child and their circumstances. And I wonder if you had examples from your own experiences that gel with what I've said or are inconsistent with what I said.
Peter, you're on it totally. In addition to the statement you made, there's also the power of influence and impact that comes from relationships. There's the ability to say, wait a minute, what happened? What did you want to happen? And what could we do differently? There's the power of listening that young people claim everybody older than them that we don't do. But it's a practice to be able to allow them to make full statements, give their opinion, don't cut them off, and then respond. Or just say, just take the time to be thoughtful about it. And so, yes, in my work, I found that it's really important. I can think of, some of my best moments along this journey, Peter, have been young people who were just as involved back when I was a principal. I was principal from like 2001-2 when I met you until 2011. And then to have some of those young people that were just as involved, took a different route to college, 2 years community college, 2 years at UC Berkeley. I have a couple young people that actually work as deputy probation officers in partnership with me. So there's some joyous moments. There are moments where I've actually bumped into former students. They may have a young person in trouble. And when they see me, I see them being many me's. When I meet with them as a family, they're assuring me, oh, Ms. Tate, you don't have to worry. My son will not be back because da-da-da-da. And they actually have taken restorative justice and relationship building as a way of life. You could see it in the way that they have respect for people in authority. They don't see consequences as punishment. They see consequences as being something they create as an action plan to transform lives. You see them doing the work. I've been blessed to have maybe about 7 students whose lives I impacted join me in this work in different arenas, in different ways, and partnering with the city of Oakland. And so I know that focusing on being my best self every day works. Focusing on listening and helping young people learn to make better choices works. Having the mindset that if a young person has learned some bad things, all that means is they have the potential and the capacity to learn some good things. So throwing away the bias, the judgmentalism. I mean, I really, if you could think back to how much fun we had learning together, I really try to create that kind of cocoon for them where whatever is going on, every day in our classroom life wasn't a day where somebody didn't have major barriers to their success or major personal responsibilities getting in the way of them moving ahead. And together we figured it out, we worked on it, and we all became one of the top groups, I believe, in educational success across our nation. I think in many ways, many of us left that room determined to make a legacy that others could follow. So it's just perfect that I'm here with you this many years later, over 20 years later.
And it feels like no time has passed. It really doesn't. In the leadership model that I use to advise others, there is a dimension, it's called collective aspiration. And that is really the heart of an organization's work. And inside that dimension is a term, positive connectedness. And on the most basic level, positive connectedness speaks to the importance of human connectedness, right? Being kind, empathetic, compassionate. It speaks deeply to the psychological safety that we curate for the people in our sphere of influence. You spoke about this so beautifully in terms of the relationships with children, young people from the past, and how they've continued to be a part of your life as they continue to improve the lives of others in their spheres. And so I want to return to your work with Stanford and what takeaways you might share with our listeners, because I thought the conclusions told us something many of us knew intuitively, and you were able to document it as well, about the power of relationships. Like, what was it? It was to see the child as a person and not as a criminal. That was a quote from you in that piece. So what did the team learn? And what advice can you give to leaders listening to this podcast?
So one of the key elements that we learned was how to use the power of a relationship to motivate young people to success. What I loved about it was the Stanford targets, goals, and essential questions in the research aligned with my practice as a high school educational leader, as a high school principal working with kids that got in trouble and building ways for them to get out. And so being able to set aside blame, that's huge. Being able to understand that I don't need to even know what a person has done in order to say, hello, how are you? And be kind and greet them, just like nothing has gone wrong in their life. And so it actually allows you to give a young person who's coming out in a state of mind where they're going to be judged, they're going to be poked at, laughed at, made fun of, and really criminalized to a point that they feel like school is not a place for them. To give them a chance to stop and do a reset of their mindset to say, well, is there anybody at the school that I might want to build a relationship? Is there anybody I have a relationship with? And how can I better express what I really want for myself in a way that helps me improve my academic performance?
So if you'll talk about that for a second, because I thought that was a really big takeaway from that study, something that I think intuitively lots of leaders do, particularly principals, when a re-entry meeting is what sadly we call it. And so a child who has been suspended returns to school and there's a meeting with the principal and the parent and maybe a counselor. And the really quality leaders, those who really understand positive connectedness, will ask that question that you and your team asked at Stanford, which was, is there someone, or who is someone at this school that you trust? And those who do that usually see a better result in terms of that child feeling as if there's someone in his, her, or their corner in that school. And you did this as a study, so it was so revealing to know that in a more clinical way, you were practicing it, but in a research approach, that you saw that when you engage a child and a leader in that question, and then engage the teacher, usually it's a teacher, but it could be somebody else at the building, to be a part of that process, that recidivism rates in terms of a child returning to a juvenile detention center or getting in trouble again that those rates just plummeted in terms of the fact that kids were able to stay in school because they knew that they had someone who trusted them. Was that the takeaway I was supposed to have?
Yes, you totally have it. And so the name of our research is called Lifting the Bar. And so if you think in terms of a bar or a barrier, and so the whole idea in building a relationship with the young person is, what are the barriers getting in the way of your success, and how can we remove them? And we do that as school site leaders. We do it as educational leaders. This whole idea of building community or community schools was the origin of my work as a principal in the alternative environment. So the whole thought around what are your basic needs, food, clothing, and shelter? How are we meeting those? Okay. How about your feeling around safety and belonging? Another key moment in the work is taking time to say, do you feel safe at the school you're returning to? Is there another place that we should consider for your enrollment so that you can feel safe and focus on learning?
Essentially, you're making psychological safety a basic need.
It is. That's the whole, okay,
yeah.
Think about it. So if I was, say, on the freeway in a car, driving, trying to have this conversation and not crash, somebody comes along the highway doing 90, as they sometimes do these days, and I'm doing the speed limit, I would lose total control of everything I got going on because I would lose my sense of safety first. I wouldn't be able to continue. And so we carve out niches of safety for ourselves as adults every day. You don't see people with a laptop sitting on the freeway because we know better. And so yet we've evolved to this place in 2023 where it looks like our kids are literally in this freeway speed of life, trying to make sense of it. And nobody's breaking life down and slowing it down and just saying, hello, what can I do to help you? Well, what happened? Well, what is it that gets in your way? Well, did you know other youth feel the same way, that there are other young people that leave in custody, return to their schools, and they have the same thoughts and feelings that you do? We don't make anything, we don't normalize their experience at all. Instead, we operate with this sense of system thinking that first, my safety is important. I need to know what you did before I even consider letting you back into. That's not restorative. And it's judgmentalism at its worst. And it doesn't give the person a chance to take responsibility for the harm they created in a community. One of the biggest pieces of this work happened not too long ago. I worked with a young man for a couple of years, had some serious charges. But upon his release, after doing the Lifting the Bar intervention with me, he has a foster relative, an aunt, that has been in his corner on and off for 3 years. And she reported back that he told her how much he loved her for the first time. Well, I'm contributing that to these conversations that I'm having with him around his social emotional wellness, his self-management, his need for relationship building, his need to know that people are in his corner, and coming with a different sense of gratitude that there's somebody, irregardless of what the behavior has been, regardless of what the outcome has been, continues to say, he can be released to my home. He can come back with me. I'm going to forgive him. And that was one of the big things in the work, Peter, that I discovered after we separated and went two different ways. Education is a very unforgiving system. The way that we set up a grading system, the way that we give the blame, judgmental grade of F, you're a failure. Okay, how about if we just give ABCs and incompletes? You didn't get it done. Such a different feeling, even around a report card process.
Yes, you're asking people to consider what schools were created for.
Yeah.
They're institutions of learning. And so
places of socialization to develop personalities and people.
And what happens is they become character assessments when a child has not yet learned something. And I say yet because we know that they can.
Go. That part.
Right? And instead we assign a grade of F, and we've now declared that they as a character assessment are an F? And what makes you think that any child, anybody as an adult, even as an adult, we'd say, I'm not coming back. I got an F. I'm out. Now imagine an not fully yet developed brain, right? We know that our youth don't develop their brain until about 25. And yet we're asking them to come on back. You got an F, come on back. Hattie, what does the term an imperfect leader mean to you?
Well, that term, first of all, is very attractive to me because I believe leadership is an imperfect science in that it's not an innate ability. One of the things about leadership for me is if you've not been a great follower, I don't see you learning to be a great leader, expecting others to follow you. It depends on how you get there. And so being an imperfect leader means we're on this journey in an imperfect world in the business of perfecting young people in a system that is not perfect, that has failed many, and yet somehow accepting the fact that the work is about creating perfection where there is imperfection is valuable, is worthy, it is worthwhile, and it is so rewarding when you go against it because it's really going against the grain. It's really back in the days of when we met, it is thinking out of the box at its best. It is never giving up hope. It is not only being able to give space to young people, but be ready to forgive over and over. In religious areas or in spiritual and belief systems, there's this saying that we say often, and it said, God loves you and so do I. And the underlying thought for me has been, okay, so if we believe that, then how about this one? God forgives you, so do I. If God forgives us, who are we to be holding each other in this place where we rationalize unforgiveness, hard-heartedness, and recognizing America the Beautiful is just a song. The beauty is what we create.
And we'll be right back. Hey, district leaders, I know you already know this. In schools worldwide, cell phones are posing real challenges on student engagement and mental well-being, and I want you to meet Yonder, a proud sponsor of An Imperfect Leader. And let me share this story from a visit I made to some schools in Silicon Valley. I asked some kids what they liked about Yonder, and after some funny looks, they shared that actually, with Yonder, teachers don't have to battle with them over phones anymore. In fact, one kid said to me he didn't have to worry anymore about his parents texting him in class, and the kid next to him sort of shoved him and goes, "Texting? My mom used to FaceTime me in class." I want to introduce you to a support system that increases teaching and learning. I want you to discover why 1 million students choose Yonder daily. Minimize distractions, maximize learning potential. To learn more, go to overyonder.com. YONDR. We're back for segment 2 of An Imperfect Leader called Imperfect Leadership in After Action. And my guest is Miss Hattie Tate, an educator, principal, administrator in the Oakland Unified School District in Oakland, California. And in this segment, we ask our guests to deconstruct a decision that they have made, and then we discuss it. So Hattie, what happened?
So if I reflect on a decision I made that's still ongoing, it's like unfinished business, it would be the career decisions that I've made. So leaving Mills College, ABD, all but dissertation, sometimes appears to be an unfinished part of my life. Choosing to work with young people that get in trouble was like a life choice for me. I grew up in Oakland. I went to school in Oakland, and I wanted to give back in my community. Along the way, I had to decide between a career move to central office, to a high-level position like network superintendent, or leading something in central office, or continuing to do this work. And so I chose to continue to do the work. I was actually appointed to the position that I'm in 2011 by a superintendent. And then even after that, I had a superintendent, and before that, asked me about moving into high school network work to assist other principals. And so sometimes in hindsight, I just wonder what it would have looked like. But this journey has been my journey as an imperfect leader. Most people at the level of work that I'm doing now, they had the pathway where they finished the PhD or they gathered a PhD in the work shortly after leaving the principalship. Well, in my case, every dissertation I started ended up being a practical implementation in the work that I do. The entire idea around community schools. That was an idea that I brought to Oakland at the time when I was enrolled in my grad school project, and I did look at it as a pathway. However, during that time, the superintendent took my school and the work I was doing as a model to Capitol Hill, and as a result, we now have a community school movement across the nation whose funding cycle was launched by little old Dewey High School, Dewey Academy in Oakland, with a video that I appeared in. Next step, doing this work, in spite of the fact that I've been partnered with Stanford for research, I could have stopped along the way and finished my dissertation. And there are people that could say I took the low road. Well, sometimes the low road is the best road to take, in the fact that while I'm still all but dissertation, there are groups of people in other states that remember the work that I've done and literally insist on calling me Dr. Tate. As far as commitment, passion, consequences, results, even an imperfect journey can perfect lives and turn into systems of perfection. It's not always the high road, the best way to get to, I guess, our nation's most difficult problems.
It's interesting that you refer to these things as low roads or high roads, because it almost seems as if you're also adding some type of value, as if one pathway is more valuable than the other. And I want to push back on that because, you're from Oakland, you've taught in Oakland, you grew up in Oakland, you graduated from Oakland, and you see the young people, the youth of Oakland, some in crisis. And you see your skills, intelligence, ability, networks as an opportunity to have those who have been unsuccessful become successful. And so I don't know if it's really a low road as much as you were at a crossroad and you chose to move in one direction as opposed to moving in a different direction. And let me also add that I think it's kind of interesting because so many who come on this program will talk about a decision that they made that is professional and that is not necessarily personal. And yours is really a mix of, it was a professional decision that had personal ramifications. And ramification doesn't mean bad or good. It's just that there were consequences and this is the way that you went. And I'm curious, as you look back on this decision, right? Because the community school movement, its genesis is Oakland, California. I mean, you look at it from a national model and people go back to Harlem Children's Zone and Oakland, California, right? Harlem Children's Zone is one area of New York City. Oakland is an entire city. I mean, it was incredible, that work that was being done and that has been replicated across the country. I interviewed a superintendent in Tulsa who created a community school. That is like, you're the mother of that work. That's pretty amazing. And so then think through the Stanford research work around the power of relationships, particularly for children who are re-entering their home schools. This is deeply personal work. And you made a decision to not pursue within the organizational structure these higher positions in title, not in importance.
Exactly.
And so when you look back on it, though, because I'm going to go through the questions that I always ask, what do you think got overlooked as you were making that decision?
So that's a good question. And here's how I want to clarify low road, high road. In doing this work, I found that the thought process, even with low road, high road, is a traditional systemic way of thinking. Having a different path to get to success is, first of all, a right. I did things differently. I chose to do things differently. And even now, there's the unfinished business of continuing to shift the narrative around the work. One of the perceptions about this work for me, Peter, has been how often people will look at the work I do, which is hard work, and they don't see the heart.
I think what you're saying is, and if I could use the metaphor of an airplane that is taking off with cloud cover, is that the low road is everything below the cloud cover, and it can be somewhat turbulent down there. Right? And when the plane is able to escape that part of the atmosphere and clear the clouds, it's calm and there's sunshine, and you don't always see what's going on below the clouds anymore. And so what I think you're saying is the high road is, I chose not to take a position that no longer gave me the on the ground involved personally. I wasn't ready to give that up because those relationships were too important to me, because the city was too important to me.
Yes, exactly. That I saw the power of my work in having direct contact with young people and families, and not in sitting in meetings all day.
The question is, what got overlooked? The fact that you chose this topic as our conversation topic says that you're still wrestling with the decision to this day. Did something get overlooked in your thought process about why you chose one path over the other?
So the thing that I feel like it was overlooked is, I think it's the collective integration of my work into a system that could sustain it. Even now, I don't have any more faith in this antiquated educational system after 11 years of hard work trying to change it than I did 11 years ago.
So what got overlooked is the fact that there appears to be an absence when it comes to a succession plan. What happens after Ms. Hattie Tate chooses to step away from this work?
So no, there is a succession plan, but the succession plan is going to lie in the community. The succession plan and where to even best ground my work is going to be in the community. I spend more time in community forums, engaging with people from other governmental agencies to sustain this work than I do interacting with people within the organizational structure of the school district. Because what got overlooked was, I don't think I ever set out to dismantle the educational system as it is. I always wanted to bring something to support it. And I don't think I ever thought that the power of this work would be unacceptable in this long established way of doing things. So that's the part I think that's been overlooked. The importance of me being more than a unit of one, the importance of me being able to not just sustain my work, which I'm not worried about that piece, but to expand it in a way to have a greater impact.
Understood.
And so that's what I'm going for now. How do I take this to other places? So Stanford, we're in other places. We're in other states. We're in other cities. We're looking at moving out across the state with the intervention itself. But at the same time, in the city of Oakland, I am looking to plant it within our Department of Violence Prevention as a tool used by the life coaches as a part of violence prevention for the city. Safety is where we all are. And when will our systems understand that? And it's not about pushing people out to be safe. It's building relationships to change lives, to understand that we're still the socialization process of America. Nobody in America succeeds without having at least one teacher, whether it's in your household, homeschooling, or in a public institution or private institution. Education is the change agent for success of our nation.
I hear what you're saying, and I believe what you're proposing is initially what got overlooked is the fact that your program, your academy, your work was treating a symptom that was occurring within a traditional school model, right? Unsuccessful kid, send them out, send them to Hattie. And what you are changing is this idea that only children in crisis should be entitled to this restorative justice, relationship building, a place where they are honored and valued. Yes. And that ought to be a part of the entire system. And so instead of receiving and trying to fix, you are inserting this belief system into a traditional model and, for a lack of a better word, infecting with hope, optimism, relationships. You add any other adjective you would prefer, but it sounds like that's what you're trying to do, is really, in the time that you have and the authority and influence that you have, that you're trying to make this a better place for all, not just for those who get sent away.
And I would change your word infecting to impacting.
Impacting. Much better. Much better.
Peter, you're so right. And here's the piece that I think we all have a responsibility to push back those barriers that get in the way of us being the best humanity we could be.
I wonder, what would you have done differently? And I ask that in a form of advice. What would you offer as advice to those leaders who are listening, who are considering new positions and new opportunities? What is it that they should be looking for, as opposed to those external, extrinsic rewards, because you chose an intrinsic reward? So what could you have done differently, and frame that in a way as advice for what could they do differently as they consider these opportunities?
Anybody poised on a decision-making process now, I would say go with your heart. And don't be afraid of the hard work in order to let your heart have its way. Has it been easy? Not always. Choosing a position that had a ceiling as for a salary, not easy. But what's easy is the joy that I have every day when I get up to do the work. And every time I put it in a box or a drawer and put it away, the joy I walk away with. I'd much rather be happy with little Hattie and big Hattie than to have pocketed a bunch of dollars that moved me to a different tax bracket where I would not have been able to have influence. Stanford may have never located me because I wouldn't have been working on the cradle to prison pipeline. I think it's just time for all of us to take a hard look at what's valuable. Material possessions are necessary to a point, but there's a point where, as the young people say today, there's what's called extra. And look and see where in our lives are we just being extra about living even. And it's costing us. It's costing us peace of mind. It's costing us influence and impact. I am still proud to say I was appointed to do this work by a superintendent in partnership with a superintendent.
My guest again today was Ms. Hattie Tate, an educator, principal, and administrator in the Oakland Unified School District in Oakland, California. And Hattie, I knew that this reunion was going to be just the best. Just hearing your voice brought back so many memories of working and leading in Oakland. And when I first met you back in the early 2000s, I was struck by your drive, your passion for kids, your intelligence. And quite frankly, I wanted to grow up and be Hattie Tate. So all these years later, you still have a passion for dismantling systems of oppression. And you're still reminding us that communities win when we're committed to the success of all, not just some. So thank you so much for joining me today. A real joy.
Thank you, Peter, for having me.
Music for An Imperfect Leader was written and arranged by Ian Varley. Sam Falbo created the Daruma doll butterfly artwork. Imperfect leadership is not a scarlet letter. It is a badge of honor. It recognizes that serving as a lead learner is about being a vulnerable leader, an empathetic leader, a compassionate leader. And I'm proud to be an imperfect leader, so I hope you'll join me next time for another episode of An Imperfect Leader, Leadership in After Action. Imperfect leaders. Are you facing challenges filling open speech-language pathologist positions within your district? It's kind of a silly question because I know you are. Empath Speech understands the critical need for qualified professionals in your schools. They recognize that communication lies at the heart of academic success, and that's why they're dedicated to helping you bridge the gap by offering expert therapists and innovative telehealth solutions. Don't let open positions hinder your students' success. Partner with Empath Speech today and ensure every child in your district has access to the speech therapy they deserve. Empath Speech, EMPAT Speech.com. Empowering students, empowering schools.